All right, so you wanted like the inside scoop on how to rule the world, huh?
Yeah.
Well, we dug into this audio clip you sent, and let me tell you, it takes a pretty unconventional approach.
Yeah, it's not what you'd expect.
No, not at all.
Like instead of like giving you the steps to seize power,
Right.
the speaker flips the script and looks at the tactics of those already in power.
Oh, interesting.
Like they argue that true control isn't about armies or brute force,
Yeah, yeah.
It's more about like shaping the narrative,
Mm.
controlling people's minds through communication.
Hmm.
And to get this point across, they use a really unexpected example.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
Apple's marketing strategy for the iPhone 10.
Whoa. Okay, so we're going from like world domination to iPhones. How
Yeah.
how does that even connect?
Think about it. Everyone knows iPhones, right? It's
Right.
something we can all relate to.
Yeah, definitely.
All the hype, the anticipation every time a new one comes out.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The speaker argues that much of that frenzy isn't organic.
What do you mean?
Like it's not just people naturally getting excited.
Yeah.
Right. They think it's carefully orchestrated by Apple to control how we perceive the product,
Oh, so they're saying Apple is like manipulating us into wanting the new iPhone.
basically.
Yeah.
They're controlling the narratives.
Okay, but how do they actually DO that with a phone launch?
Well, they use strategic leaks and controlled access for one.
Like what kind of leaks?
Remember all those rumors about the iPhone 10 before it came out?
Yeah, I guess so. There are always like photos and specs and stuff.
Right. And the speakers suggest those weren't accidents.
You're saying they were intentional.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
all about generating buzz, getting people talking, even before the phone is out there.
So it's like planting seeds of anticipation, even if those seeds are just rumors or speculation.
Exactly. And it works.
Mm,
Like people get caught up in the hype, even if they don't realize they're being led there.
that's kind of sneaky.
And then there's this tactic where they give early access to certain bloggers and YouTubers.
Oh, yeah, right. The ones who then put out those glowing reviews.
Exactly. And those early positive reviews create this wave of hype before any in-depth critical reviews can even come out.
So by the time the average person can even get their hands on the phone, their opinion is already influenced by this whole carefully constructed narrative.
Pretty much.
Wow, it's like Apple's playing chess and we're all just pawns.
That's a good way to put it. The speaker's point is that these same tactics are used on a much larger scale by governments.
Wait, really? You're saying governments are using iPhone launch tactics to control us?
Not exactly iPhone launch tactics, but the underlying principle is the same. It's about controlling the narrative.
Okay, so how does that play out with like governments?
Well, particularly when it comes to issues like terrorism.
Oh, okay. This is where things get interesting and maybe a little unsettling.
Yeah, the speaker doesn't hold back. They question the official narrative surrounding events like the Las Vegas shooting.
Really? They go that far?
Yeah, they even call the police the most violent terrorists in the nation.
Whoa, okay. That's a pretty strong statement.
It's meant to be. They want to jolt the listener out of their complacency.
Make them question everything.
Exactly. Even the information coming from seemingly authoritative sources.
Okay, I see where they're going with this.
And they back it up. They present statistics on police killings and brutality and urge listeners to really consider their own reactions to police presence.
It's definitely a challenging perspective. It forces us to confront our own biases and fears.
And that's exactly the point. They argue that governments exploit fear, especially fear of terrorism, to justify increased surveillance and control.
Oh, so they're making a connection between Apple and governments.
In a way, yeah. They're saying that both are using similar tactics to manipulate public opinion and achieve their desired outcomes.
Wow, that's a pretty bold claim. So what's the common thread? What's the underlying mechanism at play here?
It all boils down to controlling the narrative. Whoever controls the narrative controls the perception of reality.
That makes sense.
Oh.
And by controlling perception, they can control behavior.
Exactly. Like, think about the phrase owning the narrative. What does it really mean?
It's about being the dominant voice, the source people trust and believe.
Right. It's about framing the conversation, setting the terms of the debate.
So are they saying we're all just puppets blindly following whatever narrative is presented to us?
No, not necessarily. The speaker believes that while these manipulative tactics are powerful, we're not powerless. We still have the capacity to break free from these narratives and form our own informed opinions.
Okay, so there's hope then. But how do we do that? How do we develop that critical thinking muscle and start seeing through the smoke and mirrors?
Well, that's what we'll dive into next.
All right, sounds good. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back with more on how to break free from the matrix. So how do we break free from these narratives? Like, how do we even start?
Well, the speaker gives a few strategies. First, they say It's important to just be aware of the tactics being used.
Okay, so like know your enemy type of thing.
Yeah, once you understand how these narratives are constructed, you can start to see the patterns, recognize them in action.
Like learning the magician's tricks. Once you know how the illusion works, it's not so impressive anymore.
Exactly. And then they encourage us to question everything.
Question everything.
Yeah, don't just passively absorb what you read or hear. You got to ask yourself, who's presenting this information? What's their agenda? What evidence do they have?
Right, because everyone has an angle.
Exactly. And don't just rely on one source, you know?
Get multiple perspectives.
Yeah, especially ones that challenge your own views.
That's hard, though. Like,
Right.
who wants to read stuff they disagree with?
I know it's uncomfortable,
Mm.
but that's how you break out of your echo chamber.
True. Get the full picture, even if it's not what you want to hear.
Exactly. And the speaker also warns about getting swept up in emotion.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Like, how often do we react to something without even thinking it through?
All the time.
Yeah.
And the speaker says that a lot of these narratives, especially ones about fear and security, are designed to trigger an emotional response.
To bypass our rational thinking?
Exactly. Think
Yeah.
about the example they gave, the truck running over people narrative.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It taps into those deep-seated fears, right? And the interpretation often depends on your political leanings.
Yeah, like if you're on the left, it might make you want more gun control.
Right. But if you're on the right, it might fuel anti-immigrant sentiment.
And the speaker's point is that both sides are being manipulated by the same tactic.
Exactly. It's about recognizing those emotional triggers and taking a step back.
Analyze the situation with a clear head.
Right. Critical thinking isn't about ignoring your emotions.
It's about understanding them.
Exactly. And using that knowledge to make better decisions.
Okay, so awareness, questioning, emotional intelligence. But it all sounds like a lot of work.
It is. It takes effort.
Huh.
But the speaker believes it's worth it.
So it's possible to resist these powerful forces.
They think so. They say that while governments and corporations have a ton of resources, individuals have something they don't.
Which is?
Authenticity. The power of personal experience.
Like sharing your own story.
Exactly. It connects with people on a human level, builds trust.
So it's not just about consuming information differently, it's about communicating differently.
Right. Finding your voice. Using it to challenge the dominant narrative.
And the speaker highlights a powerful tool we have for that.
Which is
Technology.
right? Just like corporations and governments use it to spread their message, we can use it to amplify ours.
Social media, for example.
Exactly. It lets us bypass those traditional gatekeepers, reach a wider audience.
Though social media has its own challenges, too.
Oh, definitely. Echo chambers, filter
Yeah.
bubbles, all that.
So it's not just about broadcasting your message. It's about engaging in meaningful dialogue.
Yeah. Respectfully challenging different viewpoints. Building bridges.
That's a good way to put it. And ultimately, the speaker believes truth has a way of coming out.
Even against powerful opposition. But it needs us to participate. To be informed. To be critical. And to be vocal.
It's about recognizing we all have a role to play in shaping the narrative.
We're not just passive consumers. We're active participants.
It's a powerful thought, but sometimes it can feel overwhelming. You know, like you start seeing manipulation everywhere.
It can be a lot. But the speaker ends on a hopeful note. They say we always have a choice.
A choice to be aware, to question, to resist.
Exactly. It's not about giving up. It's
Yeah.
about using that knowledge to empower ourselves.
And they use a really interesting metaphor.
Tell me.
They compare the spread of truth to a wildfire.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, even the most powerful forces can't control a wildfire once it starts. And all it takes is a spark.
So we need to be that spark.
Exactly. Use our voices, our actions, our connections to ignite a movement for truth.
It's about individual action.
Right. Even small acts of resistance can have a ripple effect.
Like questioning a news story, sharing a dissenting opinion, talking to someone who disagrees with you.
All those little sparks can add up to something bigger.
It's not about waiting for someone to save us. It's about taking responsibility.
For our own role in shaping the narrative and doing what we can, even in small ways, to push back against manipulation.
That's a powerful message.
It is, and it all comes back to the idea that true freedom lies in the ability to think for ourselves, to resist manipulation, and to actively participate in shaping the world around us.
It's a call to action,
Mm.
especially in this crazy information landscape we live in.
This whole deep dive has been quite the journey.
It has. We've gone from iPhones to governments, from manipulation to individual action.
It's been fascinating to unpack all these ideas, and I think the most important takeaway is that we are not passive bystanders in this information age.
Right.
We all have the power to shape the narrative.
We do, and that's a powerful thing.
So to you, our listener, we leave you with this final thought. What narratives are shaping your worldview? What stories are you telling yourself, and what stories are being told about you? Take the time to examine those narratives, question their origins, and consider what alternative stories might be waiting to be told.
Because the power to rule the world doesn't lie with governments or corporations.
It lies with each of us.
This is just the beginning of your exploration. Keep questioning, keep thinking critically, and keep diving deep.
I gotta say, when you start to see these manipulative tactics everywhere, it can be a little overwhelming. Like you start to feel almost paranoid. I don't know. Does the speaker offer any hope here, or are we all just doomed to be pawns in someone else's game?
Oh no, they definitely end on a hopeful note. Remember, their whole point is that while these tactics are powerful, we aren't powerless.
Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom.
Not at all. We always have a choice,
The choice to do what?
to be aware, to question, to resist, not just give in.
Right. It's not about despair or throwing in the towel. It's about taking this knowledge and using it to empower ourselves.
Exactly. And they have this great metaphor for it. They compare the spread of truth to a wildfire.
A wildfire.
Yeah. It's like even the most powerful forces can't control a wildfire once it's going. And all it takes is a spark to get it started.
So we need to be that spark.
Exactly. We got to use our voices, our actions, our connections, to ignite a movement for truth and authenticity.
I love that. It's not about waiting for someone else to save us.
Right. It's about taking responsibility for our own role in shaping the narrative.
Doing what we can, even in small ways, to push back against all the manipulation.
Like they said, even small acts of resistance can make a difference.
Like what kind of small acts?
Questioning a news story, sharing an opinion online that goes against the grain. Even just talking to someone who sees things differently.
All those little sparks can add up.
Exactly. It all contributes to something bigger.
So it really comes back to that idea that true freedom is about thinking for ourselves, resisting manipulation, and actively shaping the world around us.
Absolutely. It's a call to action,
Yeah.
especially these days with all the information overload.
Well, this deep dive has been quite the journey.
It has. We've covered a lot of ground.
From iPhone leaks to government surveillance,
Yeah.
from manipulation tactics to individual action. Wow.
It's been fascinating to see how it all connects,
Yeah.
And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that we're not just passive bystanders in all of this.
We can make a difference.
We all have the power to shape the narrative. And that's a powerful thing.
So to you, our listener, we want to leave you with this final thought. What narratives are shaping your worldview? What stories are you telling yourself? And what stories are being told about you?
It's worth taking the time to really examine those narratives.
Question where they came from, and consider what other stories might be out there waiting to be told.
Because ultimately, the power to rule the world doesn't belong to governments or corporations.
It belongs to each and every one of us.
This is just the start of your exploration. Keep questioning, keep thinking critically, and keep diving deep.